I'm Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. I'm joined today by Andrew Cook, Executive Director of Ministers Island, who's here to talk to us about the extensive trail system over on Ministers Island. Thank you, Andrew, for being here today.
Thank you, Vicki, for having me on the show.
Now, we're actually going to go follow you on Ministers Island. Our Ian Curran went and spent the day with you going through the trails over there. Before we go to that video, can you tell us a little bit about where you and Ian went and what we'll see in this video?
Yes, we've been planning to do this for quite some time, Ian and I, to take some pictures of the walks and show how beautiful they are and so on. And unfortunately, every time we planned to do it, it was pouring rain or something like that. So we ended up postponing, and we finally ran out of time. And the day that we were there, it had to be fairly early in the morning. And of course, the fog was down and it was gloomy and very damp, as you can see from the film coming on. But if I could show you this trail map here right now, I don't know whether we can see that best on here, but we started off at the house here, and we walked all the way around the perimeter trail up to here, and then we walked up to the top of Shea Hill up here, then round and down and back up through the cedar lane and back across the field to the house. And we were actually out for a total of about a couple of hours, although we stopped for quite a while and did some filming and so on. And there are a total of about 20 kilometers of trails on the island. The perimeter trail, which is the yellow one, if you could see on the map here, is about 7 kilometers altogether. And it takes you all around the outside of the island. And if you're so inclined and you're really energetic, you can actually walk on the beach all the way around the island at low tide, and that would cover close to 10 kilometers altogether. But
wow.
There are some pretty rough patches around there, so it's not for the faint of heart. Most of the trails themselves are fairly easy walking trails. They were originally carriage trails, which Sir William put into place to have his horses and carriage draw around the island. Some of the trails through the middle parts of the island are a little more challenging, a lot of root systems and so on, and you just need to be a little bit careful with your step on some of those places, but they're generally relatively easy walks, not too much altitude, although Shea Hill is pretty steep to climb up, and Ian was quite out of breath by the time he got to the top. But he and I had a lovely day out there, and within half an hour of us getting back into town, it was a beautiful sunny day, and all the fog had disappeared. So unfortunately, by that time, the island was closed because of the tides.
Well, I think so many of us, when we think of Ministers Island, we think of this rich history, Sir William Van Horn, and obviously the ties to Canada's railway. But I would say even more than half of people that love Ministers Island, it has to do with that deep connection you can experience with nature, and just this incredibly unique way to enjoy the environment.
Yeah, as you can see from the pictures that we're going to see, the parts of the trails wind their way through dense forest, and I think I used the term on the video, almost look like fossilized trees, some of them, and there are trees that have fallen down, and of course you just leave them there because they form their own ecosystem in time, and new organisms start to live in those fallen trees. But then there are big areas of meadow which were cut out originally for the farming operations that Sir William ran through the 1890s and the 1900s and later. And those have not been reclaimed as of yet, and we're trying to keep them obviously as basically meadows, so that there is a contrast between the different types of vegetation and the different types of trail experience and so on.
Well, I think without further ado, then, Andrew, we should have you lead us on a tour of some of Ministers Island's trails.
It's my pleasure.
So this is Andrew Cook taking our Ian Curran on a tour of Ministers Island's trails.
We're here on a bit of a cloudy morning at Ministers Island. The mansion Covenhoven is in the background here. What we're going to do today is set out and visit some of the trails that people can come to when they visit the island. There are over 20 kilometers of walking trails on the island. It's a wonderful place to be, and hopefully we'll get a sense of that over the next few minutes. So here we are at the trailhead, and you can see over here is the map of the island with all the trails, the red, yellow, and blue. We're starting out on the yellow trail, which is the island perimeter trail, and is actually just a little over 7 kilometers all the way around the island. As you can see, the trails are quite easy to walk. There's some nice gravel around, and there's plenty of opportunity. We're going to walk now to a trail that's a little bit more challenging and show you just what that is. Over here on the right, you can see the direction markers, and they're color coded to match the map of the island, so you always know exactly where you are. So I'm just stopping here for a moment to show viewers pictures of the old stone gate posts, and these were built in Sir William Van Horn's time. These trails were originally carriage trails, designed to have his horse-drawn carriages take him around the island. And the fact that these walls have survived over 100 years is testimony to the building that went on at that time. So this would have been an old gate post here, and there's another trail goes off up into the woods up over here, one of the Covenhoven trails. Now we've just branched off into what's called the Boardwalk Trail, and we'll see why that is shortly. But this is one of the more challenging trails on the island, and it's really good for people who love to hike. So this section of the trail is very marshy, and as you can probably see on the sides, so we put the boardwalks in. There are 3 or 4 of them altogether to try to make sure that people weren't slipping in marshy ground all the time. The boardwalks themselves are a little slippery today because it's wet, but it's much better than walking through the bog. As you can see all around are almost like fossilized trees. They're beautiful structures in themselves, and they form a fitting backdrop to this walk. Over here on my left is an old water well, which has been there for over 100 years. I like to tell people when I'm going on tours here that it's actually the sarcophagus of Sir William Van Horn, because he was a very big man, and as you can see, this would be a huge grave if it in fact were a grave, but it isn't. It's a water well. So now we've come out from the forest down those steps that you see behind me, and we're into the meadow. And you can see one trail goes off up to the left here, and then the one straight on, which we're going to go down, and there is in fact another trail goes off down here, but it's not maintained at the present time. But these trees, the meadow must have been cleared way back about 100 years ago, because obviously this whole island was originally forest, as we've just been walking through. So here we are at the top of Shea Hill, which is just on the left of me here is the highest point on the island. Magnificent panoramic views out over here. So here we are now back at the other main trailhead, which is just close to the historic barn. So this is the main, as it says, start for the perimeter trail, P1, and also for the central trail, C1. Walked the trails for couple of hours now. Had a wonderful time despite the fog. I hope you'll all take the opportunity to come out, hopefully on a nicer day than this, and visit the trails for yourself and visit the wonder that is Minister's Island.
That was our guest today, Andrew Cook, leading CHCO's Ian Curran on a tour of the trails of Minister's Island. And Andrew, again, is here with me now. Thank you, Andrew, for that incredible tour of the island. You were saying, I don't think Ian was expecting it to be so extensive.
That's correct. And you'll note we only really covered this half of the island. We didn't cover the other half as well. One of the advantages of being a member of Minister's Island, you can join as a member for $60 individual. I told Ian that, and he didn't believe it. Only $60 and I can come here every day. So $60 as an individual and $100 as a family is you can come over anytime you like and walk these trails, as long as, of course, you come over during the low tide and not during the high tide, because you can't get onto the island during the high tide. But we do have the membership system. There are about 330 members, and we're presuming most of them come from the immediate St. Andrews area. But a lot of them, I know, take advantage to come over and hike. They also bring their bikes. If you have a trail bike, some of the carriage trails are very good for trail bikes. Other of the trails, I say, are very heavily routed and so on, and are not quite so suitable, but the people who do go on the bikes usually figure out which ones are the best ones to use at the time. There are a couple of places where you can get down onto the beach, and these are all well marked, and you can spend some time walking on the beach as well as walking on the island itself. So it really is a beautiful place to spend 2 or 3 or even 4 hours on the island, and then maybe use our picnic tables and take a picnic with you and have a good time and enjoy a picnic lunch. Or alternatively, at various spots around the perimeter trail, there are some Adirondack chairs looking out to the beautiful views across the water. Just sit and enjoy the view and enjoy the lovely summer weather, which it wasn't in that film, but it certainly was later on in the day.
And I imagine it's beautiful, not just summertime. It would be a gorgeous place to watch, for instance, the fall leaves.
Yes, fall would be truly spectacular. We saw some pictures of the cedar lane that used to be the main entrance to the house, and that's beautiful at any time of year. It does get pretty icy in the winter, so although we don't discourage people from going, it's certainly, you have to be very careful when you're walking around if there is some snow and ice, because the trails are certainly not maintained in the winter.
Mm-hmm. And it must be a unique experience in terms of it not being the high tourist season, in the shoulder season as well. You must feel like oftentimes
Yes.
You have the island to yourself.
Absolutely, yes. And I mean, I walk there a lot, as you can imagine. And when I'm out there, I can be out there for hours and not see a soul. Other times you see a lot more people. It depends on the number of days and the number of people who are out walking. But it's a truly spectacular experience, just being out in the forest and the meadows, and you could be absolutely anywhere in the world, and then you get all these spectacular lookout points and views, and you can see over to Hospital Island, and over behind that the mainland down towards Letite, and it's then Deer Island over on this side. And if you go down to the bathhouse at the end of the island, you get a magnificent 360-degree panoramic view out over the Passamaquoddy Bay. So absolutely wonderful panoramas, and it's worth it. As I say, I spend a lot of time over there, and I just go and look and just enjoy the views.
And then obviously interspersed with some of the most beautiful historical structures that
Yes.
we have in the Maritimes.
Yes, we saw those stone gate posts that were built. It's incredible to me that they still survive over 100 years later, and you can see how nature has taken over, because somewhere right between the two posts there's a new fir tree has grown up, so obviously that trail hasn't been used for some time. Mm-hmm. But we do maintain the trails on a regular basis. It takes a lot of effort and time. We have a dedicated staff that basically does nothing but keep going around and keeping the trails clear and cutting the branches so that you don't have to go crawling through the woods or anything like that. So they are well maintained in the summer. They're not maintained in the winter, so you need to be a lot more careful in the winter.
And for those, I know there's a big community in Southwest New Brunswick of 10,000 steppers, people that get in their 10,000 steps every day. So you're saying it's 20 kilometers though,
Yeah.
of trails in total. So you really could do a route for you that, based on time of day and time of year, could be unique.
Easy. I'm a 10,000 stepper, and when I walk and do the whole perimeter of the island, and I usually park on the near side, and I walk across the bar and then walk around the island and back. That probably does about 14,000 steps or something like that. So it's quite a challenging little walk.
And then we are also a dog-loving community as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how dogs are welcome?
Dogs are welcome. Have to be kept on leash, obviously, in the hospital, on the island, and we hope that people will pick up after their dogs, because we don't, obviously don't want people walking in the remains, shall we say. So we do ask people to pick up afterwards, and there are lots of deer on the island. There is other wildlife as well. I can't say I've ever seen anything truly threatening, but there is wildlife on the island. It is a wildlife preserve, so we don't want the dogs chasing the wildlife. There are also cows, which we bring over each summer to graze on the meadows, to keep the meadows down. There's a local farmer that helps us by bringing some cows over to do that, and so they're all enclosed within a fence, an electrical fence, so they can't get out. But even so, if there were dogs running, it wouldn't be good. Certainly wouldn't be good for the cows. So we ask people to keep the dogs on a leash.
What's the feedback that you get from either first-time visitors, but also people that are annual members that come and use the trails?
The people who use the trails almost single-handedly say it's the most beautiful place. And the whole experience of Minister's Island, quite frankly, people stop me and say, I really didn't know this was here, and this place is so unbelievable, the history and everything like that. So it's well worth the experience. We're hoping to start working with the government on getting new exhibits into the island space, into the mansion and the barn and so on, and give people a reason to come back time and time and time again. But to me, the trails themselves are a perfectly valid reason. Every time you come back, you see something different.
Do you have a favorite route? Or even, I know with the tides being what they are, it's always a different time of day that you can get to Minister's Island, which makes it all the more a special experience. Is there a favorite time of year or time of day or trail that you like to take?
Doesn't matter to me. It's always good. Every time I go, I see something different. I see something I haven't seen before. Sometimes get bitten, but that's par for the course. But the forests are, you're so isolated within the forest, and then the meadows are so expansive. One time there was an airstrip in the middle of the island there. I don't know whether you knew that, but it's no longer maintained. But they used to land planes there in the 60s. So the meadows are very expansive, and it's just a gorgeous place. That's all I can say.
I know that a lot of people do go to Minister's Island to visit these incredible structures that Sir William Van Horn lived in and had this incredibly self-sufficient island. But when you walk the trails, does it give you a deeper understanding of why he could have lived anywhere in Canada, and yet this was his beloved summer home?
Absolutely.
Of why he picked this island.
Yeah, and if you imagine traveling in those days, the 1890s and the 1900s, it obviously helped that you were a railroad baron and you had access to your own trains and all that sort of thing. But even so, I mean, he traveled all across the country. He traveled to Europe. He had a house in Montreal, which he lived at. He had a big farm in Selkirk, Manitoba, which he visited all the time. He had the place down here in Minister's Island, and you can imagine the amount of time he spent to travel to come here, how much he must have loved it, and the whole property. And you just have to sit on the veranda at the house at Covenhoven and look out at the view and say, my God, that's just beautiful. It's just so, beautiful and relaxing. And you probably know that Van Horn didn't believe in sleep. He only slept about 4 hours a night. He thought sleep was a waste of time. And so he used to get up at all hours of the morning and go out and paint, and he had his own separate room on the ground floor of the mansion, so he didn't disturb his wife when he got up during the night to go paint. And most magnificent artist, just a really gentleman who was really ahead of his times and could really make things happen. And the whole island was self-sufficient. They grew all their own produce and everything on the island. So he invested a lot of time in there, and given the time that he was doing the traveling to get here, you obviously knew how much he must have loved it.
Well, I think some of the most magnificent sunset views I've seen have been from over on the island. So
Yeah.
it is kind of neat that those of us who live in the area can experience a glimpse of what it must have been like for him to spend every
Yes.
day and night there in the summer
Yes.
months.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Andrew, so much for giving us more insight into these beautiful trails, and we hope to get over to use them again soon.
Very good. Hope to see you over there, Vicki.
My guest today has been Andrew Cook, Executive Director of Ministers Island, talking to CHCO about the trails. I'm Vicki Hogarth. Thank you for watching Southwest Magazine.
Southwest Magazine is a news and public affairs production of CHCO Television.